collaboration between the visual arts department and Calit2 and the design lab have brought Desirée Holman down for a great talk today. And Desirée, as all of you here know, is an extremely established artist. She's been awarded the SF MoMA Seiko Award in 2008 and the Arcadia in 2007. She's been exhibited in a number of international exhibits, from Sao Paulo and Milan to Toronto to Berkeley. And her work has been reviewed in Art Forum, the LA Times, New York Arts, and many other great venues. And one thing that I really like about Desiree's work is that I think that it's really hard to have work which simultaneously tackles really serious issues and is also really playful. And one of the things that I like about Desiree's work is that it's really coy about disclosing when it's being serious and when it's being playful. And when I've talked to Desiree, I think I can't even tell after talking to her when it's being serious and when it's being playful. And I think by wiggling in that way, it has a lot more power than if it was just obviously one or obviously the other. And well, she'll tell you all about the work, but I think that the energy that it creates in that way is really exciting for me. And I'm just thrilled to have Desiree here.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Do we need more chairs? There's a chair behind the desk there. There's one here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming. I'll just start with an apology. I'm sorry, I'm going to be reading from a script for the entire time. If I don't, I'll forget my name. So Q&A, I'll try to step away here. Hello, I'm Desirée Holman. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share a little bit about my work with you. I see myself as an artist come armchair anthropologist with the emphasis on the armchair. This means that I spend a significant amount of my time researching and engaging with ideas in fields from which I have no formal background or training. This research time seeds my work, and today I'll mostly talk about this part of the work. Though the work is heavily driven by ideas, I also want to acknowledge that it is in equal parts driven by a discovery that is not based in language or even in rationality. Instead, that aspect of the work unfolds in the creative process, through immersion with the work, and through contact with the work, through visuality, through imagination. I'm a project-based artist, investigating topics across multiple mediums, usually spending 2 to 3 years on each project. Through the lens of fantasy, my work reveals an in-depth inquiry into the ways individuals identify themselves within larger cultural constructs. The projects are approached through research in a variety of fields, resulting in a rich expansiveness of thought and methodologies. This process evokes query and plurality rather than inert opinion or belief. While each project is a world in of itself, it's also a unique chapter within a larger interconnected oeuvre that is ongoing. Today I'm going to do something I rarely do, and that is just focus on one particular project, my current project titled Sophont. I began production on this project in 2012, and it currently consists of paintings, the soundtrack you're hearing now, which was created by an LA artist, Angel Diodorian, who's most well known for her work with the Dirty Projectors. It also includes sculptures, costumes, and a number of past performances. I'm currently working on shooting a live-action video component that will end up being a multi-channel video installation with a live performance component to it. Inspired by New Age science, science fiction, and technology culture, actually, the science part is a typo. It's not inspired by science. Sophont explores these movements by treating fringe fantasy as reality. The story is about Sophonts and our projections and desires for Sophonts to be actualized. Science fiction author Paul Anderson coined the term Sophont to describe intelligent beings with extraordinary emotional and reasoning capacities. It also relates to the term sentient being, a technical term in Buddhist discourse that denotes any being with the ability to feel, perceive, or express subjectivity. The first couple of images I'm showing, including the earlier nude, are the initial images where I started to work out the project and kind of signify some of the ideas in the early investigation. This image is symbolically important for the project in that it pictures this fantastical vision of a skyscape, yet the point of view is grounded to the earth. It's grounded to the body and the human mind. Obsessed with the leaps of faith we choose and refuse to make every day, the project investigates interlocking metaphysical ideologies such as harmonic convergence, mysticism, occultism, and pseudosciences. Sophont explores these movements by treating fringe fantasies as if they were facts. You'll notice in the titles a reference to channeling, which is a very strong concept in a culture and New Age. ETs are often pretty heavily featured as well. So in these first three images here, you're seeing store-bought masks. I was interested in these cultural visions we share of a humanoid ET. So humanoid, an enlarged brain, maybe it's like 4, 5, 6 tiered brain. Gray-skinned, commonly pictured with vestigial ethnic features, including lack of genitalia, presumably beyond sexual dimorphism. Since the 60s, ETs have been pictured as being gray-skinned. Before that, they were very Euro, pale-skinned, blue eyes. There's actually a really interesting parallel narrative if you track civil rights or feminism along with a cultural vision of the ET. So sort of went from being this white, blue-eyed character to the gray-skinned, androgynous character in the 60s. These are paintings of aura photographs. So two of the paintings are in the exhibition here. Aura photography is a pseudoscientific process invented by a Northern California man named Guy Coggins, who I've met with on several occasions, and I suspect that he's a synesthete, and he claims to see auras. The idea is that for what for most of us is largely unseeable is visualized by these photographic images. The colors mapped in them have specific meanings which correlate to ancient Vedic body chakra colors. So he and his team have come up with meanings by looking at the Lusher color tests and Vedic color theory, as well as over 20 years of working with psychics. In this particular image, the supposition is that Eliphas Levi's spirit has been channeled and represented. He is a 19th century occultist and Rosicrucian. He's a pretty popular figurehead for modern day occultists. This is Paraclesis, a Swiss-German Renaissance physician, alchemist, astrologer, and general occultist. He's considered the grandfather of New Age. This is Emanuel Swedenborg. He's 18th century Christian mystic, philosopher. This is Franz Mesmer. He's a German physician who's interested in astronomy, and came up with this idea called animal magnetism. You've all probably heard of being mesmerized. That's him. Blavatsky, big figurehead in modern day occult practice, kind of considered the grandmother of theosophy. This is Annie Besant. She's one of my favorite historical figures in the kind of New Age occult canon because she practiced kind of a New Age spirituality, but she was also kind of on the ground working, doing, for human rights. She was a women's rights activist. And she was a supporter of the Irish and Indian self-rule, which is not common. This sort of like on the ground, like direct political action is not that common with these other folks, or largely in New Age, frankly. Bucky Fuller. This is Norbert Wiener, the originator of cybernetics. My aesthetic investigations into topics like aliens, mystics, and the possibilities of higher consciousness sit squarely in fantasy for some and in reality for others. This particular gray area is precisely the place where my investigations take root. This is one of the characters that has grown out of this body of work. It's called a time traveler. You'll learn more about them later on in my talk. And this character is wearing a hat that I call a psionics, part of the psionics series. So appearing both in New Age and science fiction, psionics refers to psychic abilities like telepathy, telekinesis, sometimes aided with the use of wearable hardware. The psionics helmets are made in the spirit of the famous tinfoil hat stereotype, used alternately to block mind reading as well as transmit communications. Made of recycled kitchen objects, new and antiquated technological hardware, both working and non-functioning, many of the headgears are also feature microcontrollers animating searching lights and antennas scrubbing for signals. The time traveler character represents a bridge between the classic tinfoil-wearing conspiracy theorist and our contemporary cadre of Google Glass enthusiasts. So there's some sculptures and further exploring this, this psionics theme. This particular sculpture has a, in the neon, it is programmed to pulse out a kind of visual translation of Morse code, and it pulses out the word Sophont. This, the title of this starscape painting refers to the coordinates for Zeta Reticuli. This is where the grays are purported to live. That actual binary star system was identified by the interracial couple Barney and Betty Hill in their 1961 ET abduction narrative. That was around the time that ETs became gray. So these are paintings, and many of them are they're somewhere in between like the NASA database and a fiction, which arguably those collection of images are already fictionalized, enhanced. Let's see, many of these paintings, the earlier aura paintings, as well as these starscapes, I scanned and then animated them. So they ended up being paintings in time. I think I'll do a little cheating here. And just give you the fast reveal here. That so there were about 32 of these. So in the starscapes, the stars would be spinning. But you might sit there, and many of them, there's no figures, but some of them, I'll be watching as the auras change in real time. Did you see that? And if you watched carefully, you might see an alien. So what I'm going to share now, or leading up to, is a recent performance that was a commission at De Rosa, which is a museum in Napa, California that it just collects Northern California artists and shows Northern California artists. It's a unique place in that it's situated on a 200-acre wildlife preserve. And so I had done a large-scale solo show there featuring a lot of the work that I've shared already. And a performance that were these characters that had grown out of the work. And before I show you video documentation of that, I'd like to just walk you through some of the characters and give you a little background on who they are. So first, I'd like to note that everyone that was in this performance was cast from the local community in Napa. So all these Sophont character types are all influenced by complex histories, but they also speak to contemporary issues of identity and marginalization. These characters, time travelers, are the characters in white. We're inspired by various cultures of technoscience, of the technoscience spirituality kind. Some of the cultural movements that exist in both the world of occulture and in the world of technology. Transhumanism is a movement that is of particular interest in that, and it's kind of looked towards transforming the human condition by using technology to enhance intellectual and physical abilities. But other ones, although transhumanists probably would not appreciate being lumped in here with Scientologists, but or Raelianism, but Raelianism is another group that I find particularly fascinating and inspired. This character type, so it's the second largest UFO religion in the world, and the Raelians believe that life on Earth started from DNA brought here by aliens called the Elohim, and the Raelian narrative contends that once their message is heard by all, the alien creatures will return to Earth to reunite in a productive relationship with humanity. One of the things that I particularly love about their narrative is how they really beautifully stitch up class and social strata. So if you do accept the Elohim and you have your DNA downloaded onto the mothership, when the Earth is destroyed and you're recreated, There's no subservient class of humans because all the work is done by the robots. Okay, so a second character type were the Indigo Children. The Indigo Child is the main character in a meta-narrative that proposes a new breed of human-looking children that are partially to fully extraterrestrial in origin and possess extrasensory abilities, profound spiritual connectivity, and extraordinary creativity and intelligence. These children have difficulty learning in traditional school environments. They experience discipline problems and are often diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. Their purpose is to usher in a new and improved phase of humanity. Indigo children are entirely self-identified. They're generally thought to be born in mass after the 1987 harmonic convergence. They're, again, often described as the next stage in human evolution. The third character type is the Estatic Dancer. This is actually a character or group that exists already in the world and actually has a form, unlike the first two. So they're an American movement of freeform dancers. They practice with directed intentionality, believing that mental focus can affect change in the world, and with the idea that their dance space is sacred. So if you've been to a kind of spiritual yoga class, a spiritualized yoga class, that's the similar type of language that they use for their practice. So theirs is an embodied practice of common New Age ideologies of self-spirituality, detraditionalization, and epistemological individualism, and that there is no clear locus of final authority beyond the individual. So I just want to read a passage to you from their website that I think would probably describe who they are better than what I can do. Return to your true self. The sacred space created at Estatic Dance brings all who enter along on a journey of movement where the veils of illusion have a chance to fall away and the opportunity to understand wholeness, aliveness, and connection come into focus. Body, mind, and spirit unite as we come back to our true selves and join together with each other to play and pray through the simple act of dancing. The liberating atmosphere creates a melting pot of acceptance. And the last character type are guides. They're background liminal characters that in the performance they guide the audience along their journey. The guide characters wear personal computing devices as jewelry, like an iPhone or an iPad, hanging from a necklace or strapped to their arms. And the devices play a fast-paced video slideshow of images that describe the historical influences of the various ideas that these different Sophont characters represent. So I'm about to play a video documentation of that performance. And before I do, I want to tell you that what I'm working on now is like taking this particular type of project and working with it as a film. So it would not be exactly what you're seeing here, but it's these characters and similar ideas. So I'm going to conclude the presentation now, and I'm happy to take any questions or, yeah.
Would you mind talking a little bit about the process by which you arrived at the art?
Yeah, so the process is, well, let's see. So I go to a New Age shop or directly to Guy Coggins himself on the peninsula, the San Francisco Peninsula. And then Annie Besant is channeled in front of the camera or whatever character. And we put the lens cap on. And then we take a recording. And then I have a photograph. And then I paint that photograph. Yeah.
So something about your practice that I find totally fascinating is how much research you do, and sort of the breadth of it. And then you're talking about, you sort of create these characters, and they have backstories. So I'm just interested, what different facets your research takes on, and whether, are you writing fiction? Are you writing sort of elaborate backstories for characters that sort of come together in these kinds of performances? Or just talk a little bit about that.
My output is really very much concrete. So I do very little writing. Actually, I try to do as little writing as I possibly can. So I think I'm working through the ideas. I'm just inputting a lot of information through reading. And to some extent, I actually want to get in the studio and then begin to disassociate from it in a real direct one-to-one. So, and just kind of work more creatively. I've kind of created some groundwork, and then I want to kind of play within those ideas. And that's one of the reasons that it makes sense for me to spend several years on a project. And an active production. There's actually years before that are the research part. Yeah.
In the paintings you did of the the various star outer space paintings, the series, how did you arrive at which sort of snapshots of star systems you painted?
Well, I've started with the Zeta Reticula coordinates, and so the first one was looking at a star map that Barney and Betty Hill drew after their abduction. And then doing some Google research and finding oh, this supposedly matches, or really similarly correlates, right, to the actual map. And from there, then it was just a matter of finding images that were big enough.
Big enough. Like the images from Google?
The file size was big enough.
To make a print of?
I didn't print.
Yeah.
That there would just be enough information that I could zoom in. So some of them, in the beginning, I started, the very beginning one was an abstraction, right, of that star map. It started out with the main stars in the right places, and then it became abstracted. And then I kind of moved towards making a one-to-one replication. And after I spent, one I didn't show, but after I spent about 7 months making one 10-foot long painting that was a pretty exact replication, I sort of decided to abandon that and get creative. Yeah. Lara.
So you started out by saying that you think of yourself partially as an armchair anthropologist, and it definitely feels like you're creating a whole world, civilization to inhabit, or set of civilizations to inhabit the world. I'm wondering how you think about that act of creation as opposed to documentation. In anthropology, there's also tension to the extent to which when you're describing a culture, you're really documenting it as opposed to creating a fiction from your own perspective. I'm wondering if you think about it that way.
I mean, I think anthropologists try to do that, but that's, I mean, can you ever really do that? I mean, can you ever uncouple your own bias? I mean, I think that's the kind of problem that's one of the problems with anthropology, and that's one of the problems with trying to see beyond ourselves. We're anchored by our own experience.
I guess my question then is, do you see that you started out by making a distinction that you're an armchair anthropologist, and I'm wondering if you see that what you're doing is being different from anthropology from your point of view?
Yeah, in that I don't have an education in anthropology. And, I'm as interested in reading original scholarly work as I am in reading conspiracy theorists on the internet. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, kind of piggybacking off of that question, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what the spectators are doing in the video, because I was wondering about how they position. When I was watching it, there was an uncomfortable sense of resonances with travel or safari type deal. So partly because it was happening. So what is the relationship that you see in that piece between the people who go to the gallery and then go out to the field to watch these things? Are they participants or are they spectators, or is that line get blurred at some point?
They're spectators. I mean, it was a procession. So they were on a journey. There was a contract that, I mean, they didn't sign anything, but they were told explicitly by the guides, you have to make sure you're prepared, like you use the restroom, you check your phones, you don't talk, you wear comfortable shoes, you're going to be interacting. I mean, something that I don't have documentation of, but that was quite beautiful, was because it's a wildlife preserve, there were peacocks coming in and doing their funny displays, their funny mating displays in the crowd, and they were also seeing, you probably noticed there's an extensive outdoor sculpture collection, so they were able to see. I mean, I think safari may be an apt metaphor for this. Yeah, they were looking at the work and it that was pre-existing, and these kind of rituals, these ambiguous rituals, and they were engaging in a ritual, and that they had to be quiet and listen to the soundtrack that was nature around them. So there were all these birds, and part of it that were flying around because they had their nests right above where they were walking. They're flying around the audience. So there are a lot of really amazing sounds. And it just was an exquisite landscape. Yeah.
That's another question. I like very much your paintings on the aura. I think it's an aura for these different peoples, like Western or Wiener. They are, for me, not classical paintings, but paintings in a more traditional way, where the artist defines what's going on in the painting. Instead, with your paintings with the stars, the sky, I was surprised that I could find these lines from the lens of the camera on the the stars. Though this is a kind of technical artifact, it makes clear that we have a certain perspective on the sky, and it could have been also just a painting with white dots on a dark sky, and how you experience it if you are outside the city and just enjoy. And why these stripes, why these stars on top of the stars, this technical artifact in the painting.
Some of them I purposefully made in Photoshop as a way to kind of reference the artifice of this image, and in some ways the futility of trying to understand what's beyond.
Beyond the machine or Photoshop?
Beyond our own 2 feet. Yeah.
Desirée, I have a question about, in a lot of your work, it's similar to the research question, that you often go through a lot of steps that the audience never gets to see. Like in prior work, you've done sculpture where the audience only ever gets to see photographs of the sculpture, or performances, but you only see the documentation afterwards. And I was wondering if you could talk in general, and the other thing that really strikes me about a lot of your work is your fearlessness in terms of the media that you'll work in. And a lot of them have a real craft to them. So I was curious if you could talk generally about the experience of your work of making things that you intentionally never let the audience see, and how do you have the chutzpah to jump into to do real craft and all sorts of different media?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I have kind of 2 contradictory impulses. One is that I'm actually really interested in the idea and the end, but the other is that I actually think with my hands. And so think through materials. And I'm most comfortable starting to think of the ideas that I've read about and then kind of transcribed in books and then go revisit. I'm most comfortable continuing to think about them by making something while I'm thinking of them, or like I'm thinking through it that way. So that's my process, but really what I want to present is ideas. So, and then, you know, there's this whole world of media bias. Like, you know, people have a romance with the hand one-to-one relationship with the objet d'art, you know, and some people have a harder time with the recorded image, and a lot of stuff I make is quite garish. So it allows me to kind of circle back for the audience and kind of, I think also put a pause button, right, and take a moment to really focus on something. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, Desirée will be here afterwards if you have questions for her. And let's thank Desirée for coming.
Thanks for coming.